For sure.
I did want to ask though. So from like, okay, actually, let's build this book to releasing it. I assume there were a lot of research done. Roughly, how much research on your end, specifically, Chris, of like the writing end of it, ended up from like day of actual okay, let's do it to okay, let's actually finish the script. And as a second part to that, how much of that research laid the groundwork for Peregrines, and how much additional research was needed?
With Group of Seven, I got lucky in the sense of doing the research while I was on paternity leave with my daughter. So when she was napping or when she was otherwise occupied, I could do a little Googling. As part of my job, I certainly have access to a number of informational resources or know where they are on the web to kind of get that information quicker without maybe doing too much of a deep dive. So I knew where to get the information, but I probably did one or two pagers of history, of backgrounds, of bios for all the characters plus some of the events. Probably over 3 or 4 months took me just to kind of collect that information together, and use that to inform the script. And then as I was writing the dialogue for the script of Group of Seven, I would want to insert something, and so I would then do some more research on the fly. An hour here, an hour there. There's a whole scene in so issue 2 has the explanation of the villain of the Landsknecht, of like where they came from with the sack of Rome, and that was something like Jason and I were talking. We were like, well, he was mentioning, we should probably have some more background on these guys. And what did they all come up to, or what did they get up to? And so I said, and I just did a little Googling, found, and as soon as I saw like sack of Rome and all these things, I was like, perfect. And so then just it kind of happened a little bit. I didn't think when an opportunity presented itself, I didn't think too much about it to really deconstruct. It's like, is this what we really need? Sometimes I did, but most times we found things that fit, and also were fun, and we thought were fun, and thought were fun to explore and fun to draw. So a lot of that kind of went in, but I think the main research was probably 3 or 4 months to get that story going. And with Peregrines, we got to issue 3, and issue 3 is when the Peregrines are introduced in issue 3, in about a 3-4 page, right, 3-4 page scene, and that was when we were like, well, we started really thinking about adding additional female characters and how to do it in a way that that fit the story we wanted to tell, and was kind of responsible to the universe that we were creating and all these kinds of things. And so, and our intentions. And so that's where a little bit of reason, that's when I started finding out about all these incredible things that I didn't know about the Canadian Army nurses. And so that's gone a little bit into Peregrines, but it's been less in-depth research. It was more, because Group of Seven was 7 specific individuals, and on the back of those issues, we have like their little bio, where they were born, and date of birth. We don't necessarily have
that. Is super cool to have them all lined up.
Thank you. It's super fun to do. But for Peregrines, it hasn't been quite as that. It's been more about thinking about how we can expand the, not just their universe, but the situations they might find themselves in. So there's a little bit more of leaning into some of those more extraordinary elements that we could just kind of explore and put into the book.
Beautiful. All right. I was going to ask if you guys are going to be at Fan Expo Special Edition in November. I feel like not.
We haven't talked about it.
Well,
I haven't looked at it, and this sounds, often when we look at what the restrictions are, I don't mean COVID restrictions, but the restrictions of the event as it is designed. Let's just say they're going to have 50 creators there. I can name 50 better artists than me that they're going to get on that list in Toronto alone, no problem. So it gives me a sense of what they have in mind, and then where we would fall on that in that pyramid, or on the rungs of that ladder. So we haven't talked about where when we're going to feel comfortable going to events. I know I'm jonesing for it. Like, I really want to be everywhere.
Yeah.
I want to be at those kinds of things, But we haven't I haven't looked at it yet, and we haven't talked about. Is this something we should go to, Chris? Like, have you looked at it yet?
I not really. I know some of the specifics about it, but just to your point, I am jonesing for something, and I don't know if that's clouding any judgment I might have on a certain
do be safe,
attendance.
gentlemen. Please be safe.
Right. Yeah. So.
Oh, of course, of course.
But to your point too, if they are going to pull it off, I'm sure they likely have a roster of guests. Although we tend to fall into the artist alley crowd anyway, so I don't know if there is room. I guess we'll find out. There might be a call out if things are going okay, and then we'll talk about. I mean, we would again if things are if things can be as good as they can be. I mean, I'm sure we consider it. And the other one I've heard about too is VonCon. There's one coming in October. I want to say October or November, and I know of a couple. I've seen some chatter on social media from some Canadian creators about it. I think everyone's again taking things with a grain of salt right now, but they seem intent on moving forward with a show that is obviously safe and seems to be reaching out to people who are prominent in the Canadian cartooning scene. So. And comic scene. So I guess we'll see about that. That's in a couple of months, I think. So, yeah.
Again, as long as you feel safe to do so, I think it'd be great. I'd love to personally get to come and see you guys, have a couple books signed, stuff like that. So yeah, again, just be safe.
Of course. Thank you.
We'll do.
One thing I thought was super cool, and just I guess in my head I built these ideas about you guys because I looked into you, I'd seen your backgrounds and stuff like that, and I really thought educational backgrounds and stuff were really interesting. But I love that you guys you could go to schools and stuff and teach and bridge the gap between here's the art end of it, here's history. So if there is a teacher out there who, given the new situation that's going on in the world, is struggling to figure out what their curriculum might look like for their history or art class, how can they get in touch with you? What is it that you guys do when you go out and do this? Yeah, give me the rundown.
Go for it, Chris. Yeah, go for it.
So you can reach us at info@groupofsevencomics, again, the number 7.ca. And in terms of what we do, we have been fortunate enough that we can pivot with the demands of teachers or teachers' expectations or hopes when we've been able to do these kinds of classroom visits, from things that are completely ungroup of seven related, where it's just talking about cartooning and it's not related to the book in any way, just sort of some fundamentals of cartooning and storytelling, to something as detailed as explaining, some of the questions you've had today as well, like that we've been able to talk about in front of classrooms. So we cover a wide swath, but overall I would say that a good place to start with what we do in the classroom would be around talking about researching history, Canadian history, drawing inspiration from historical events and historical figures, and collaboration, and creating story out of history, and playing with it a little bit, and how exciting history can be when you look at it through the lens of play and creation as opposed to memorization. Right? I mean, I can tell you 100%, without a shadow of a doubt, I've learned way more Canadian history from participating in this project than I ever did in all my history classes combined. The fact that I was getting to tell an adventure story featuring these Canadian historic figures forced me to go learn about them in ways that were relevant to me. And for the rest of my life, I'm going to feel a connection to these human beings and their legacy because of this act of creation and this participatory act of creation. And I mean, maybe it's a sign of me getting older too, but now when Remembrance Day comes around, I feel a much more somber wave of emotions. I'm quicker to break down or to really to feel some very heavy emotions, because in my own kind of false way, I feel like I've tried to empathize with these people during this horrific circumstance that they signed up for. And even though our book doesn't usually carry the weight of World War One or the First World War. It doesn't carry it in that same mood. It's a lighter-hearted adventure series. I can't help but identify more with these people and what they sacrificed, whether they're characters in the book or actually just all the other men and women that served. It's just unbelievable, and that spills over into every other area of conflict and time in history where people have endured these kinds of circumstances. So there's so much that comes out of the act of creation that connects to education. And that's one of the big things that we get to talk about and try and encourage students to go in that route. We placed a series of questions and discussion points in the trade paperback for teachers to use within the classroom. There's a sort of classroom guide. So talking about things like creator bias, looking at technology and how it's used in the book and comparing that to historical documents and what's actually evidenced as being part of the war, several other things like that. So we kind of spin out of that into a good discussion with students, and then also just field questions about creating comics and in the Canadian landscape. There you go.
Wow, that was really heavy. Thank you.
Yeah, it's getting late for me and I'm getting moody. It's like that time of night where I start to get a little blue, in the sad sense, not in a getting filthy sense, but the Canadian history is a powerful thing, but making meaningful connections to history helps us move forward with the present day. I'm not so quick to cheer for the idea of war as I was when I was 11 and I loved G.I. Joe. Now I think about the real people that are involved, and it's a heavier thing. As well as there are more Canadians now coming from places around the world that have experienced areas of conflict and have seen things that I'm grateful to never have seen in my life. But unless I have connections to those kinds of stories, unless I have empathy for people that have gone through those things, I'm liable to disregard those kinds of feelings and experiences in others. So I'm really grateful that the book has provided me with an opportunity to research, and I would encourage all teachers to give their students an opportunity to research history in a meaningful and creative way to allow students to make those connections as well on their own terms.
I think that's no. I mean that you're right. There's
spitballing
a way to history that, because of the way that Call of Duty deals with it, or war movies romanticize and overdo it and just make it commonplace, that it gets lost. And I think whether it's age or not, I think it's a true, real connection. And even for me, like the book you guys have put out, like I said, it literally made me want to do research.
Right.
And I think
me too.
one of the things that you guys did fantastically was that first 8 pages or so, especially the first. I think it's actually the front and back interiors, as well as the first few pages that show the trenches. It was just like, whoa! It felt heavy, and it set that mood perfectly. And I think that's fantastic.
Thank you. That page was actually a bit of an afterthought. I remember drawing that one in a morning. And just thinking that there was an opportunity to put something at the front and back of the book. Like when you're drawing a comic book, you think about, okay, we've got 24 pages of print, and we never thought about what are we going to put in the front and the back inside cover. And that one kind of came to us, and it was fun to make. But the trench is empty too, right? It's sort of like this kind of quiet moment where no one's there. Is it because they're all dead, or is it because it's a memorial site, or is it, it's a little bit ambiguous as to what's going on in that. But the real history side of it's pretty powerful stuff.
And it's manifested itself in ways that we could only have, not necessarily dreamed, but it certainly has, in the sense where last summer, for example, we were sent pictures on Canada Day in 2019 of someone, a fan who enjoyed the books, took the books to Vimy and like took the books and took pictures with the books at Vimy Ridge.
Wow.
And we were just like that. We didn't know what the react, shocked. I mean, pleased, honored. I don't know what the correct response is, but we were just to have that book, have that impact, to have that person bring those books across the water to across the ocean to have that experience was pretty meaningful and impactful for us. So it's manifested itself in other ways that we just are very powerful ways that I don't know if we were either ready for nor had intended to happen. So,
Konrad, you had mentioned about storytelling people before, and for people like the three of us, we are all men who appreciate storytelling in various capacities, and this idea that that when we tell those stories in whatever form, everyone's going to tell a World War I story in a different way, right? But the version that we told is our version of a story, not the story. It's not the definitive story. It's just a story that we told. But that's one of the ways that people pass on those ideas, those real lives, and it's to think that that individual who brought it over made a connection to that story, and it was meaningful for him, and then sent us photos of him there on Canada Day. Like I remember being, I believe, at my parents' house and visiting them on Canada Day, and Chris sent me like a text like, "Jason, you won't believe this," and there was the image of this guy holding up the book at Vimy. It was mind-boggling to think. But at the same time, like, human beings are storytelling species. We respond to those pieces. That's why Chris said before about the heroic journey, feeling like he already knew it. It's because he already did. It's in all of us. We all know all those that template exists in us, cross-cultural, and and I'm really grateful that we get to acknowledge the meaningfulness of a Canadian story. Right? It's like this. There isn't one Hercules movie or one Hercules comic. There are so many. It's you can't keep track. But we don't have very many different versions of Canadian stories around World War I. There are historical ones. There's only a couple movies made by Canadians that are in wide release about World War I. And this was just another kind of story that will be meaningful to somebody somewhere, and having seen it be meaningful for a specific person, it was like Chris said, it was very powerful to see that have an impact. So it was super cool. Yeah. Makes me want to make more comics, tell more stories. But also to try and encourage others to tell their stories too, because someone else has a different story to tell that is that's going to impact somebody else down the road. So we should all be making a point of sharing stories, whether it's through the oral tradition, through cartooning, through script writing, book writing, television, whatever it might be. I can go on. I can keep naming things.
Whatever your medium of choice becomes, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow. Or at the pub.
Yeah. So I think that might be like the craziest, coolest thing, like to have someone actually taking your books to Vimy. One of my questions that I've got for you is just looking at your website there. When I scroll down far enough, I'll see you guys have gotten, what is it, 3rd place award for best comic. You've got a bunch of awards, like national news organizations have contacted you. You've clearly struck a chord with readers. What has been some of the most unexpected attention and or praise that you guys have got, like the top 3 things or whatever?
Jason, you might. I'm just gonna get my dog inside. Sorry, she's barking up a storm. I'll be back.
So Chris would say that Canadian Geographic, recognizing the book as one of the top 10 reads of 2018, I think it was. That one came out of nowhere for us. We really had no idea. We didn't submit the book in any way for that. So that really caught us by surprise. Chris, I was just saying about Canadian Geographic.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that was out of the blue. That was something that we. I don't know. Did you already tell the story? I don't know if you've. Or did you?
Is there a story?
Well, the story is that they gave us a shout. Like this is like early December, a couple of years ago, and someone just emailed and said we're big fans of your stuff. And I noticed it was like they were an editor at Canadian Geographic magazine and all these things. And like 2 weeks later, we're on this list of their favorite books of the year, alongside, like Michael Palin's latest not blog, sorry. Michael Palin's latest Arctic travel book, and Chris Hadfield's book on being in space. and then Group of Seven. And we were just, that was something that was, obviously we weren't expecting, and it has led to some, when we asked people where they hear about us, that got us some attention for sure. And then the other pieces too, I mean, they're all usually nominated. So whether I've been nominating Jason or Jason's been nominating me or my mom's been nominating the book, I'm not sure. But point is, people were voting on them, and so it was really it's really touching to see that we've made an impact in the sense that we've struck a chord with the book, and it's done well enough, and people respect it enough to highlight it as some of their favorites of the year. So that's been been very nice.
Yeah, like I think for me personally, like having come to your book, the first time I actually saw your book, I was the first time I walked into Sidekick, having never been there either. I was just walking in, I was like, oh, this looks like a cool spot, and I browsed around, and Chris happened to be there, and they were telling me all about, oh, this book is here, and we've got this wall of local creators. And I just happened to be going through, and she actually said, hey, this is Group of Seven, this is what it's about. And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And yeah, I just think that from what I perceive as in the scope of comics and, publication houses and, all this giant, not monopoly, but monopolies that exist or existed, Group of Seven is like this small little book that, for me is like hometown sort of Canadian little thing, and yet somehow you guys have got nationally noticed, you're internationally selling, people are contacting you from across borders, and like that's a wild idea, right? Like even you guys are chuckling at it, but something about your book that you've put out, which is not a superhero book in the medium of comics, is not it's not got a name attached to it like Jim Lee or Grant Morrison, and yet
are you Jim Lee? Am I Grant Morrison?
Well,
I'm looking. I'm looking at.
Although
which one of us?
I don't know who those guys are.
Like Grant Morrison, Jason. I think in the scope of comics, especially like a smaller production, like where you guys have locally had it printed, there's something really cool about the fact that you're getting this literal international attention. So clearly you guys have hit the right chord, got the right subject matter, and the right presentation to really pull readers in. Like for me personally, one of my favorite scenes in the book is when Francis takes a shot at someone who's running away from them. And just the way that it is scripted and written, it's, the major chunk of the panel is Francis picking up a gun, and then it smaller panel after panel, it shows like his eye down the scope or down the barrel, the guy running away, him breathing, the guy further away until he takes the shot in the next panel or page down. And yeah, it's just you guys have created something that's quite powerful. And I just want to say as a fan, thank you. But clearly, I think you guys deserve that kind of attention.
That's very kind of you. Thanks, Konrad. To your point about getting attention, it's also we've been seeking attention. I don't mean that in a silly way, but we're not shy. And Chris was going around with a script under his arm, talking to anyone that he thought was a good counsel and could offer him some advice back. And it was, Chris, you were sincerely looking for it. You weren't going through the motions, and you're a relatively pleasant guy to be around, and you can. Sorry, there's flies buzzing around. I'm talking about being pleasant. I'm like, the stink lines are coming out and the flies are coming. But you were going and shaking hands and meeting people pre-COVID, and putting yourself out there for potential. I don't know. You weren't going to be ridiculed, but you were making yourself vulnerable to that. We were seeking that kind of feedback from people. And when it came to the comic, we were going into stores and saying, here is our book, and looking at where we wanted to be, where we wanted the book to be, and like, oh, how does one get there? So we went to shows and we applied for shows, and at shows, we're not hiding behind, comics at our table. We're often standing up and talking to people who go by and complimenting their cosplay if it's something cool, like, hey, nice Captain America, or whatever it is, and talking to people who go by, oh, what comics have you bought? What have you? And they look at our stuff and they ask us questions. We give them answers. And if they don't buy anything, that's cool. Just have a great day and nice to meet you. But we're putting ourselves out there, so it's not just that we're getting something back. We're looking for it, and we're trying to also give that out, put that out there, so that people do know we exist. I think there are a lot of really great. I mean, there are countless amazing cartoonists and creators out there in our area and Ontario and Canada and the world that they don't necessarily apply the piece of having the outgoing part. They don't make connections to other people within the community that would possibly help their book get to the next step of readership or marketability. But we're just not shy about it, and it's served us well so far. So as I'm glad that you like the book, and as good as the book might be, the other side of it, of course, is that we're doing the legwork to shake the hands and kiss the babies, our own babies.
Right.
That's fair.
How many babies?
Right now.
Our own.
But not kiss the hands and shake the babies.
I was just gonna say, as long as you're not kissing hands and shaking babies, you're good. But yeah, no, that's fantastic. So, what portion then of this entire project, which is still ongoing, is actually not writing and drawing? Is actually kissing hands and kissing babies and shaking hands.
Shaking babies?
That people might not.
0% shaking babies. I would say it's probably so. I mean, as part of you mentioned earlier about assuming or at least seeing a scenario where a script being done over to artists, do the work, and then we kind of collaborate back and forth, and that is largely true. The other part being, though, is having that division, just to your point, of the other things that are going along. So, I knew that my lion's share of writing was at a point where I could give it to Jason to do the absolute lion's share of the producing, that I still needed to contribute. And so, as part of that, it's like, okay, so if you're busy doing this, what can I do? I can set a website up, or I can learn this, or we can get some social media accounts up, or I'll make the calls to the shows, or I'll fill out the forms to get us in or something. I'm not saying that I do all that. Jason absolutely does that too. But there is absolutely a division. We don't really speak about it much, but I think there's just a natural understanding that the amount of time it takes Jason to produce the content is much more than it takes for me to write down words on a page. And that's just the reality. So there's other spaces where we can then help each other out, where to do those other pieces. So I mean, I don't know how much of our time is of the whole enterprise that we're part of. Maybe 5 or 10% or 7% of our time is spent updating our website and sending an email to a new store. I mean, it's obviously changed a lot. We were obviously a lot more active, so it's changed in that space. But following up with the printer, making sure bills are paid, like all those kinds of things that we, because we want to make sure that we're hitting all those marks and doing what we need to for this project to succeed, while also being understanding of the amount of time it takes for certain elements to be actually created. So I'd say, yeah, maybe that's less than 10% of our time is spent on that, but it's more about just understanding that it's a continual partnership, and that we'll both take pieces upon when called upon to make sure that all of it moves forward, because of just time and our families and everything else that happens in our lives. So
That's really cool. And like you're saying, yeah, so you can write a page, hand it off to Jason, and while he's busy drawing and inking, you can create a website or talk to people. Once he's done that and go, hey, check this out, I got edits, or you now have some edits to do, or maybe revisions. Jason can do something else. I think it's beautiful teamwork.
Yeah, and it's been like that since the beginning. And I think the fact that we don't take each other for granted, where in terms of workload, or we are cognizant of the time demands on both sides of what else we have going on in our lives. I think that's what is a real firm foundation for for seeing this through, seeing that trade paperback come to life for sure.
Beautiful. And like you said, you've finished and you're working on getting the new interiors, I'll say, of Group of Seven, the trade paperback, out for digital. You've literally hand delivered it, which is so cool. When it comes to Peregrines, come on, that is like the coolest thing possible. When it comes to Peregrines, how have you financed it? Have you gone Kickstarter? Is there a way that, like, is it a pre-order thing where if someone wants to support you guys now, they could pick up Group of Seven, but they could also go, here's a pre-order. Is there a way to support you as of yet for it?
We have so with Group of Seven initially, we knew we had it was written, and then we affirmed it was going to be a 6-issue series, like through conversations. So we did have like order the series now and get all 6 when they come in, and so we got some pre-orders that way. We didn't do Kickstarter officially. We did our own version of Kickstarter for the trade paperback, which was we just did a pre-order and then offered reward levels, and so had some, Jason had, did some original sketches, and there's a group print in there, and a few other kind of exclusive rewards based on the tier. So we did do that, and that actually funded, it probably funded about 90% of our print run for Group of Seven Most Secret Tale, and actually probably would have funded 100%, except we got the first proof back and we actually wanted to upgrade the page quality. So we actually made a choice to then put and then obviously put our own money in. And that's what we really do, is we basically, the sales of each issue tend to pay for printing the next issue, generally speaking. And then everything else, whether it's table fees or whatever, we tend to try to, if we'll split it halfway, and then if we make it back, great, and then we'll kind of try to recuperate that way. But generally speaking, the print run is made by the sales of the previous comics. So, and with Peregrines, as soon as we land on how many issues, we're probably 4. Is that what we're thinking right now? We'll likely set it up again where number 1 will come out and we say, hey, or all pay this amount, order all 4 in advance. When 2, 3, and 4 come out, we'll ship them to you for free. Like, we'll just get them to you. So cool. That's been a successful measure too.
Perfect. And that, again, can all be done through your website,
group7comics.com,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. All right, I got to ask, what kind of dog do you have?
I put myself on mute. I have a yellow lab who I think she's fine. She's never usually this angry or barky, but I think what it is maybe the rest of the house is silent and I'm here and
chatting
just trying to figure out what's going on. And exactly, now she's right at my feet. So anyway, but yeah, she's a yellow lab named Bijou. She's 2.5 years old and she's sweetest thing.
Awesome. Let's see her. I mean, I think we've kind of gone through a lot of my questions for you.
I'd hope so.
I think you've tapped me out. I think my only last real question on the production side, Jason, is you've literally held up a page, you've inked it, and like you said, you've got the technology. So I'm assuming you might have a Wacom or an iPad Pro or something where you can draw on it.
Yep, I do.
What is it about
Thanks,
the physical?
Thanks, Jeremy. My buddy Jeremy gave it to me, so that's how I got it. Some shout outs to Jeremy for the Wacom.
There you go. What is it about the physical medium of actual pen and ink that makes you want to keep working in that instead of digital? Because I myself have a Wacom, the big thing you can put down, and I can see myself draw on the computer. And when I do that compared to
Wow.
pen and ink, for me, like pen and pencil and ink frustrate the heck out of me because I might draw one line 10 times and then go, I like that line. And with a pencil, now I've got all these stupid eraser marks. With the digital, I can draw it 10 times and go, I like that one, and just erase the rest. So why do the classic?
Because it's classic, dude. Um, so there are a few things there. One is I've been involving my process the entire time to figure out which version of which version of my process is the most effective in terms of yielding results that I really like and making it so that I'm speedier. And the process I think that works the best for me is to draw at a high energy without concern for lines, either digitally or traditionally, it doesn't matter, and then blow it up to full artboard, comic artboard size, which is 11 by 17, print it at that size, and then light board it so that all those lines that I drew that you're erasing to make it perfect, I'm not erasing. I'm keeping all those lines, and the ones that I like the ones I really like from that big mess of lines I drew, those are the ones I then relay by putting the paper over top of the other paper and putting a good light source behind it so that I can basically trace my own work. So I'm capturing the energy that I really like from those original lines. So that's how I'm getting around the drawing and erasing problem. I'm not erasing. That's part of it. I'm drawing at a high clip, so often in different colors of pencil, so that I can differentiate my scribbly gestural stage to a finer rendering stage, and then I'm going to ink onto the artboard. That's one thing I'm doing. And the reason I like the pencil side is, again, I've got, let's just pretend, 40 years of experience holding a pencil and holding that size, that weight, and the relationship between the pencil, the graphite tip of the pencil, and paper is something that I know in my bones now. It's like my best relationship, and for me to move away from that relationship is going to get not as great results at the moment. But I do put in hours every day drawing on the tablet to build up that relationship over time. Then again, there is an incredibly satisfying sensation of gliding pencil across a really nice paper, and then hitting brush pen or pen to paper and putting down good amounts of black ink. It has I have a physical reaction to it that is a pleasant one. I'm getting dopamine hits by, the texture of pen on paper. It feels phenomenal. And there's nothing I like better than holding original artwork in my hand or seeing it in person. It really feels so. When I go in an old comic store, like go into the Beguiling, and you see on the wall all these great original pages, there is nothing that compares to seeing them in person, or even in these artist editions by IDW. Seeing those original pages in their original condition, they look otherworldly. There's something magical about them that the digital doesn't provide. But I do love blending both, and knowing that, whereas like I mentioned before about Dave Mazzucchelli, he's throwing white out onto paper to create white effects like light coming through a window or snowflakes after he's inked. Well, I can do that digitally, and it's just it does the same thing. It's no problem. So I can do some digital augmentation of pieces, but the heavy lifting I love to do on the paper itself. Yeah, that looks good, man. It looks good.
Yeah. The main reason I ask, I earlier interviewed Greg Capullo. Readers would know them from Batman primarily for the last 11 years or so. And I asked him specifically, why do you do the way you do it? And he said, one, I just like it better. So same school of thought there. But he also mentioned one of the coolest things is fans can actually buy the work. So do you guys think collectively as a writer and artist, you would ever, either now or in the future, consider selling a script or some of the originals?
Well, how much money do you have? Tell me. Give me a
I
number.
mean,
Give me a
that's up
number.
to you guys, right? It's what you want
No.
to ask.
I that would be really cool if we could literally create money by drawing or writing. That'd be neat. Emotionally, I know I'm not ready to part with any pages from a book that we really just finished it. So they're well, one day.
I mean,
If I
10
was
years
working
down the
for,
road
if
when
I was,
you're on issue, 100 or something.
I think if I was doing art, if I was making pages for someone other than us, you know what I mean?
Right.
If it was work for hire, I wouldn't feel as connected to it. But this is a story, that starts with Chris, and that I get to put as much of myself into as I can, as I know how to. And so there's so much of both of us, in the physical, in my mind, that I wouldn't feel good about parting with them. But then again, if someone said, "Here's a ridiculous amount of money, and I really like that piece of paper that cost you $1," I'll pay you $80 for that one piece of paper that cost you $1. Yeah, I mean, that's a down the road question. I don't know. I don't have an answer. I wish. What about you, Chris?
I mean, most of I don't know if there's not a compliment for like that to the art pages for the script, because the script was basically created digitally, and then there's a couple of early versions out there with some notes that could fall into a category of a work in progress, like something, right?
Chris, man, I've got versions of the script with all the artist notes. I mean,
so those
I
might
have
be
these
something.
artifacts. They look interesting to my eye.
Yeah.
Given that I'm breaking down where pages should be, and I'm doing panel boxes and drawings all over them, and of course then there's changes and edits. They look kind of cool.
That might be something that's cool, because it's got all that additional contextual information, as opposed to
Right.
a printout of a Google Doc which has the word "and" struck out, because I'm like, that's too many ands. Like that kind of stuff.
Right.
So.
I think for Peregrines, even for issue 7, I think I did page layouts. I printed it up and I added a page opposite every page of script that had basically 4 options for pages, and I was doing page layouts like thumbnail sketches right next to script, and it's kind of a neat artifact. It's a neat different way to read the issue. So those I think are kind of cool. I'll sell that, no problem.
Yeah, sell that for sure. Go for that.
Well, I think it's an interesting thing, because I always find, Greg Capullo or David Finch have drawn Batman how many thousands of times, and they've got those original block pages and they sell them off. So I just thought maybe down the road, 5 years, we'll see, the Peregrines cover that you've shown us, 5,000, 10,000, whatever it is at the time. Who knows?
Sure. At the same time, we can't overlook that guys like Greg Capullo, they came into comics at a time when selling your original art was an additional way to earn a living, in addition to your page rate. Chris and I aren't making a page rate as writer and artist and writer, so we're not looking for ways to supplement our individual income. And also, this is nothing against Greg Capullo or other artists in that style, but a lot of artists, especially those image guys, the early image guys, they were drawing things in a way, notoriously, that each page had a sort of an anchor scene or a full body action pose on it, regardless of the story, so that page had a resale value, had a marketable value when someone flips through your portfolio. That page had some, you got to get a full Wolverine or a full Spawn on every page, so that you can sell it. But that's never been a positive. That's never been an influence on me as a reader. I didn't read any of that stuff, and as a storyteller, that has no value for me in how I would render or how I would develop a page, based on thinking about its resale value. But when you're working for a big corporation that is trying to penny pinch, you've got to find every way you can to earn a living, to put food on the table for your family. So I'm not surprised that those artists drew in that way. I would have done the same thing under those circumstances. I'm just not in those circumstances, so I don't draw that way. I also don't work for a big corporation, right? This is just Chris and I. So yeah, the pages don't all look that way. At the same time, if anyone ever asked me for like a blow up of a page that they felt a fondness for, I'd take it to the print shop and blow that page up and like, yeah, man, there's your favorite page. If they cover shipping or whatever, I'd be happy to. Like it's super cool. So that's yeah. Anyway, there you go.
Perfect. Well, guys, I've had you for like 2.5 hours. So I think I'll let you go for tonight. I just have one last question that I always like to ask, and that is, what do you want your fans to know, your readers? What do they need to pay attention to, and what's coming?
Well, I mean, what's coming in terms of, well, I mean, I want them to pay attention to the fact that the trade paperback was recently released, and you know, pick it up at the places we were talking about, the website, and also, you know, reach out to us on social media. That's the big piece, and that we'll get it to you as easy as we can get it to you. It's not hard for us to do that. So please, if you're interested, and if you feel like this will be a good resource for you know, teachers that might be in your contact lists or libraries or what it happens to be, those are the types of areas we're trying to reach out to as well. So I mean, hey, if you can lend us a hand in that direction, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, ditto that for sure. That's a good message. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, guys, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show with me and do this rather long interview. As soon as I can, I'll have it out, and yeah, I'll make sure I can cut it up so we can have some fun with it for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Konrad.
Thank you. It's very cool. So